bra.
Precis.
Spela in. Kan du spela in så kan vi ladda upp det senare?
Kan streama direkt via dator.
Underbart. Jag måste gå alldeles strax. Jag bara vänder på det sen så ska jag sparka dig. I will follow you on every platform.
Good. Kan vi dela det här bordet? Eller ska jag ta det bordet?
Ja.
Perfect.
You still have like 2 bosses. Yes. There are some people that are more. It's really big.
Will it work?
Maybe.
Maybe.
You would use it.
HDMI, no.
No HDMI.
No.
Nearly there.
Nearly, okej. Bara få detta funka då.
Yes, that's what home events. Because they have direct I think here in my formulas where they are 2 kids are Swedish dads with their baby.
Också så har vi livrem och hängslen.
And they do the Latin Baba here physically and then DJ. But like this is her home. I know, yes. This is the what's the this was her chart, yeah. Last year. That we did. Södergård.
Hey. Hey, let's rock and roll.
Woo! Yeah.
Now, this little setup here is just so that we get a stream of some kind working, whether it's a recording that we publish tomorrow or it's actually a stream that actually works in the now. We don't know. We'll figure it out. Anyway, welcome everybody to this second and final part of my making public of my documented artistic research project called Mud in the Machine. Woo! Thank you all for coming. This is the playlist of this talk. This is what it looks like. I've taken the structure from a series of videos that is also part of the making public. We'll be talking about why stories matter. We'll be talking about LARPing in the carrier bag. We'll be talking about theory and isms a little bit, the world of VR, embodiment, and doing it together. Right. So just to be very clear about who we are, what we're here. This is a fairly privileged situation indeed. I'm doing an artistic research project funded. So I'm the child of two parents, shall we say. As a researcher, I belong with Stockholm University of the Arts. That's they organize my supervision, my seminars, and even a research budget. I am employed and paid a salary by the region of Gävleborg. So I'm an industrial doctorate. And this is of course, this gives me a lot of privilege and a lot of support. And I am, speaking of privileges, I'm white, I'm straight, I am working in the country where I was born, as were my parents before me. I'm cis, I'm so fairly comfortably situated. I'm also a single parent with a limited support system. So without strong structural support like these guys provide, this work would not have been possible at all. There is a bit of a tired joke that artistic research is less research and more me-search, more therapy than producing a useful knowledge. But the truth behind this is that we are meant as artistic researchers to use our subjectivity. That's the whole point. Research is not about, but with and through the artistic practice. My practice is largely. So the method of gathering data can seem a little different, and the dissemination of results can vary greatly depending on the practice. Otherwise, this kind of research has a lot in common with other types of research. I try not to veer into the narcissistic, of course. But then again, I do appear in some form in 27 out of 32 slides in this presentation. So maybe I didn't try hard enough. Stories matter. This is my first assumption. We share stories of the world. We tell the world into being. Our thinking feeds on stories. It helps us organize our reality. You think a thought, you tell it as a story, and when enough people know and share this story, the thing can manifest. Perhaps it is a story about religion, or a story of a nation, a system of economy, or a company, or any of those things that manifest quite concretely in our daily lives, but has no matter of their own. If you look at stories like this, a bit of reality conjuring, we can think of stories also as software for human brains. It also shapes how we think. It works because the conjuring works because we all believe in the same story. We let it make the same, at least functionally, kind of shapes, religion shape, nation shape, economy shapes in our heads. Therefore, it matters greatly what stories we tell and what kind of stories, what story formats we use. If it matters what stories we tell to tell other stories with, then dramaturgy becomes a burning issue. Formats are in focus. This is a quote that I return to again and again. It's from Donna Haraway, her book Sing with the Trouble. It says, it matters what matters we use to think other matters with. It matters what stories we tell to tell other stories with. It matters what knots, not knots, what thoughts think thoughts, what descriptions describe descriptions, what ties tie ties. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but I think of it as a poetic bit of prose. If stories are important and story formats are important, then we need to think about how we organize these thought patterns as stories. The usual thought pattern when it comes to story format is the linear story. It dominates a lot of our Western tradition since the days of Aristotle. It is a line, it's very often depiction with like an arrow at the end. It's always moving towards the resolution of the plot. There are, of course, alternative dramaturgies. My favorite is the carrier bag theory of fiction, because I think this is a good fit for LARPs. So what is the carrier bag theory of fiction? It is an idea by Ursula K. Le Guin. She published an essay in 1988, I think, called The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. She wrote it with novels in mind, but she also mentions human society. And this juicy hint of collectivity and participation is all I need to claim it for art. I'm going to read you a long quote now. So the hero has decreed that the proper shape of the narrative is that of the arrow or spear, starting here and going straight there and thunk, hitting its mark, which drops dead. Second, that the second concern of narrative, including the novel, is conflict. And third, that the story isn't any good if he isn't in it. I differ with all of this. I would go so far as to say that the natural, proper, fitting shape of a novel might be that of a sack, a bag. A book holds words. Words hold things. They bear meanings. A novel is a medicine bundle, holding things in a particular powerful relation to one another and to us. One relationship among elements in the novel may well be that of conflict, but the reduction of narrative to conflict is absurd. Conflict, competition, stress, struggle, etc., within the narrative conceived as a carrier bag, belly, box, house, medicine bundle, may be seen as necessary elements of a whole which cannot itself be characterized either as conflict or as harmony, because since its purpose is neither resolution nor stasis, but continuing process. Finally, it's clear that the hero does not look good in this bag. He needs a stage, a pinnacle. You put him in a bag and he looks like a rabbit, like a potato. That is why I like novels. Instead of heroes, they have people in them. And in this last bit here, saying that the hero needs a stage or a pinnacle, I also think that implies he needs to be looked at. It's an audience perspective in that somehow. That doesn't rhyme well with LARP. If we think of the dramaturgical carrier bag as a story format fit for LARP, we can note that it has room for multiple perspectives. LARP is also the kind of story that thrives on many contributions, actors and agents. We cannot play a LARP as a hero's journey. The whole point of a LARP is the interacting and building on each other's input and responses. We shape our respective character journeys with the help of reactions from others. A LARP may have one larger narrative frame, as the story of a spaceship hurtling through outer space towards impending doom, or a house haunted by memories and repressed desires where a bourgeois family falls apart, or a college for witchards where students and professors will survive the academic year and celebrate with a ball. Each space traveler, housewife, or magic student will have their own story, however. LARP as a story is a conglomeration of many, many converging parts. It is the total of the sum adding to the overarching story with all the multiple character journeys. All parts are equally valid. The only way to understand the story is to be part of it. The only way to see the story is to be part of it. The performer perspective and audience perspectives are at least times the number of players and likely more. We tell our stories to each other and listen to each other's stories at the same time. It is a beautiful mess. So what did I do with my research? how did I use my practice as a tool for research? I did some LARPing. I did some LARPs. I LARPed some LARPs. There was Crystal Tech was my first step. I did a seated seance, kind of, for 4 players who were supposed to channel for each other and tell each other things about, you know, guidance and what have you. I played that. I did that as an analog LARP first and played it at the Stockholm Scenario Festival, and then I wanted to translate it into VR. This was I started in 2018 and was kind of finished in 20, I think. So when I was transferring this to VR, a lot of VR wasn't as smooth as it was today. There were a lot of floating hands and heads. You didn't have whole bodies and those kind of things. And also, I was invited to a theater, my regional theater, and I thought it'd be nice if anyone could buy a ticket, and I wanted to design it for people who had no experience of LARP and no experience of VR. So everybody had to be seated for safety reasons. Having people locked in a seat is very, very boring for VR. VR is all about being embodied and moving around and being present. So this first stab at making a VR LARP wasn't very fun. And it was hardly recognizable as a LARP at all, according to my LARP mentors. Moved on and latched on to Nadja Lipsik, who's a fantastic LARPer and artistic researcher in Norway. She was also doing her PhD. She's now completed hers. And we did Ancient Hours together. By that time, we had the lovely standalone headsets. I could show you Exhibit A. I think you become familiar with them if you were part of the previous thing today. These are very handy. You just put a headset on and you have some handles, and it's a standalone thing. You don't need to attach it to a computer. You don't need to have lots of wires. You don't need to have base stations and all the stuff that can go wrong. So we decided to design a LARP that could be played at LARP festivals and make it easy for LARPers. So I didn't have to design for people who didn't know what LARP was, which was great. And so Nadja and I created Ancient Hours together. This is a hybrid LARP where you go in and out of VR a lot. It is for 2 players. They're held captive. They are demigods. And they're held captive in this little cell that you see represented by the paper on the floor. They cannot leave that. We torture them and they flee into their memories where they can meet each other. And the memories are played out in VR. So through the scenes, they move in and out of VR. They are kept separate from each other physically, but they meet in VR, where they can also start communicating. We tested this at Gränslandet, and then we played it at the Smoke with some very happy results. So now I was kind of getting into the swing of things, what a VR LARP might be. Then there was Cyborg Gaia Allies, which was still an exploration about relating and how to relate, not to tech so much, but to organic objects. That was never made into a VR LARP. That was only analog. We played that at Stockholm Scenario Festival. Then there was the course and show. This was something we did out of frustration, me and one of my VR LARPer friends, Silen. We wanted to kind of lower the threshold a bit for players of VR to participate in storytelling somehow. So we organized a course and taught lessons twice a week, I think, once or twice a week. And then that whole thing led to an interactive theater play in VR chat, where our students served as facilitators for a visiting audience at the end. And that course is now been reworked into a freestanding course at Stockholm University of the Arts. So that's a happy outcome. Meet Me Halfway is another LARP that I was part of. I didn't initiate this. This was a project I was invited to participate in by the EDGE project. We wanted to do a LARP showcasing lots of different tech and what it means to interact with the tech and with each other as players. And VR was one of the scenes of the tech. Again, we had to facilitate a lot for players unused to VR, to jump in and out of VR. And it requires a lot of facilitation, but it worked in the end quite well. And we learned a lot from that. And that happened at Solmukohta in 2024, I want to say. Sensorial world building, again, an analog workshop where we wanted people to explore world building from not telling the story first, but letting the story be emergent from relating to objects, from relating to each other, and using other senses than the dominant visual sense. I did that together with Lina Persson, who has produced many of the images. Also, you'll see here today. Then there was Lumen, another EDGE project, LARP, where I did a VR extension or a VR. You could kind of choose whether you wanted to play a certain kind of scene in VR or analog, which worked quite nicely in spite of being in an old disused convent in the countryside in Italy. So the tech has kind of evolved as I've been on this journey, which is it's a lot easier to work with today than 2018. And the language of plants, an adaptation of a LARP scenario that I have adapted into a VR LARP. I wanted to do an adaptation to show I want to show what the extra layer for VR is, how it changes. So it's not me designing for VR from the get-go, but it's taking something that someone else designed and molding it, working with it until it's fit for VR. So those are the parts, the practical parts of my research journey. And they are all documented in an appendix that you will find on Research Catalog. Yes, we did some courses and we talked to some plants. And of course, you know that this is something what it looked like. This is a world called The Language of Plants. It's accessible in VR chat. It's in the community labs. If you search, if you take out the VR chat menu and you search for worlds in community chat, you look for The Language of Plants, and you will find this world, which is very lush, full of this lovely moving grass and lots of oak trees and stinging nettles. Look, it's me. That Silan Tro or Laura Nemeth designed for us. It also has some inbuilt functions, so you can touch some objects and trigger a menu, so you know which role you're playing, basically. You can access that from here. There is a talking stick. It's a glade. It's a small world, and it's even smaller than originally designed because I felt players were getting too far away from each other, and I wanted to bring everybody in. And the easiest way to do that was just to make the world smaller, and everybody would have to be in proximity of each other. I think these are interesting because it gives a clear idea of the presence in VR. We are really present. These are heat maps taken from the play test that we did. So this kind of, you can see the blue squares. It is where someone has stood still for a while. If they're making a gesture, if they hold their hand for long enough, there will be a blue square. So you can sort of see where people are positioned and a little bit about where their attention is directed. And this is maybe even clearer as a heat map. You can see this is more or less the whole world, and the hot spot is where people stayed the longest and where they moved. Which is, I think, really an indicator of presence. This is a virtual world, but people are very much present in there. Love the heat map so much, and we designed the world so that it's easy to take heat maps as documentation from it. Every time we play, we will have more heat maps. It will be fabulous. Isms. So I used some other people's thoughts to think with. Yeah, I should also introduce with the language of plants. So happened that last year at Knutepunkt, I played this LARP. It was then GM'd by Omi P. Ryding, who is one of the authors, together with Roman Schramm. The whole LARP is about talking to plants, about tapping into some shamanic wisdoms in order to connect with the plants and their healing wisdom. When I asked Schramm and Ryding if they would let me work with their script and put it into VR, he looked at me a little skeptically and said yes. And maybe it doesn't seem like a good fit, but this LARP was written to connect with other players and the spirits of the plants. There's a lot of nonverbal communication, and though this LARP repeatedly encourages you to communicate by closing your eyes, closing your eyes in VR isn't great. It's not evident. Some avatars are not able to close their eyes, and people often get dizzy when they close their eyes in VR because they rely on the visual to keep them steady. But I needed all the nuances of communication that are built into the language of plants. What one player sends is not always exactly what the other player receives, but it still works. Not just because we say it's good enough, but because when we interact in play, we have some great powers of perception and intuition and feeling. I think this is the human mud I'm talking about, the mud that we can pour into the machine. And some of the presence of mud is what you see in the heat maps. Right. Using other people's thoughts to think. To think about LARPing and stories and relating. Post-humanism. I read a lot of Rosie Braidotti. Even took a distance course with a post-human summer school from the University of Utrecht. With Rosie Braidotti, I was rather starstruck the whole time. It was fantastic. I read a lot of Donna Haraway, as we saw previously, and some Anat Singh. I struggled a lot with Karin Barwat and the new materialism she talks about and eventually surrendered. There are a lot of overlaps, of course, between new materialism and post-humanism, but post-humanism springs mainly from critical theory and new materialism from physics. New materialism is a movement within contemporary philosophy that seeks to kind of rework or change the angle of a conventional understanding, an ontological understanding of the material world. The movement resists essentialism and anthropocentrism that and states that humans are one species among others on the planet, not the master of it, ordained by God as the crown of creation. New materialism rejects dualism, boundaries between nature, culture, subject, object, human and non-human. Instead, new materialists emphasize how what looks like fixed entities and apparently closed systems are actually produced through dynamic relations and processes. And agency is not something, it's not something we hold in ourselves, it's something that emerges in the interaction of forces, heterogeneous forces. new materialists emphasize how binaries around human and nature have caused many of the issues in the world by ignoring complexity. So one of the most important takeaways is the rejection of dualism. There's no simplistic cut between you and me, or between me and my headset, between me and the plants. That humanistic imagined cut of division that creates binaries is what leads to capitalist exploitation, colonization, and all the other horrors we want to push back on. And the isms that I used to think with help me condense my project into this description that I'm working with relationship-driven narratives for VR as a practice of post-humanist ethics and a new materialist ontology. I still think that's more or less right. So the world of VR is kind of built on not a post-humanist, but a transhumanist idea that we can separate mind and body, and that we can use tech to enhance ourselves and overcome distances and illness and age and whatever. The division of mind and body is very clear in VR, I think, and I'm really pushing back against it when I do work in VR. I think the tech industry, which is in, there's so many transhumanists in the big tech industry, I think they kind of misunderstood what VR is for. They thought they were building a new social media. I think they did not. I think they built something for intimacy and presence for meetings. It's not necessarily a very comfortable fit for LARP, but we can make it work. Some of the uncomfortable truths are gadgets are expensive, so it's not accessible to everyone. And producing gadgets takes a toll on the Earth's resources. Thankfully, Meta's big flagship, Meta Horizon, seems to be going down the drain, which, it was not a nice place to be. So I'm rather happy to see that go. I use VR chat mainly. And we hope for a more creative commons-based solution very soon. So let's take this transhumanist space and subvert it by LARPing in it, resistance by play. So how can we play in VR, in social VR, if it's not built for play? I think it helps to be embodied. It can be a bit awkward at first, a bit clunky, to feel present in your virtual body. So I think we need some facilitation. I design workshops to trigger, in the best case, really trigger a phantom body illusion, where you really feel the haptics that aren't there, a phantom body sense. Lots of people in VR feel it. I don't really, but I can almost feel it, and that kind of also works. When the visual input and the physical input match, whether it's the proprioceptive inner input or the visual input of looking at yourself moving, when that matches what you see in VR, you can really persuade yourself that this virtual skin is your skin. So before we begin LARPing, I want us to be prepared and fully present in VR to feel that virtual what our virtual representation is feeling. We use the idea of body transfer illusion, even if we don't get fully enveloped by it. I steal some very simple embodiment exercises from dance practices, theater practices, and once we are done, you can almost feel that virtual breeze on your skin. So much for the embodiment part. And then, of course, it's so much better when we do things together. Look, there's me again. Let's see if we can hear this. No, we can't hear this. Why is that?
Change my artistic research project, all about LARPing in VR. My name is Juffe, and this video is about the ideomotor effect and how evoking it can help a cast of LARPers function as a
Not a cast of LARPers.
rather than, just a group of individuals with parallel stories, or in the worst case scenario, a group of individuals trying to upstage each other. The ideomotor response is sometimes also referred to as the Carpenter effect. Don't worry if you've not heard about it. It's completely pseudo-scientific, and there won't be any tests. Nevertheless, it's a useful figure of thought. The best example to explain this is dowsing for water. Some guy walking over dry land holding a stick to find the hidden water underground, and the stick suddenly points down, and that's where you start digging for water. What? You've never heard of this? Well, in the countryside where I grew up, it was a thing, I promise. The point is that you move the stick even if you do not feel like you're doing it. You sense the water even if you don't register that you do. Like your body can react to information even though you do not very consciously register the information you're processing. Something similar can be felt when working with a group of people in improv, dance, embodiment, etc., and you start to move as a swarm. Not knowing where the movement starts or how you pick it up, but you're taking part in it all the same. Feel vague? We probably have some footage we can show you.
So this is one of the embodiment workshops that we did. I had some help from choreographer and dancer Martin Sonderkamp. He is the funk master that you see in this case. He was guiding us, and I think we were in there for nearly 2 hours, just moving together without really communicating at all. And I think this is such a nice example of how, if we enter VR with care and work through this exercise, we can still make it work. We can still have these connections where we pick up on each other's movements and act as a swarm. Right. Stop this and move to the next slide. Right, so this is the address of my research catalog, and that is where my project will be published. With all the documentation, I hold a record for a number of files that have been posted on Diva and Research Catalog. And now I would like you all to LARP that you are mimes. Some of you may be, but if you're not, you'll just have to pretend. And I want you to hold up your dominant hand as if you're holding a hammer. And you take the other hand with a pincer movement as if you're holding a nail. And you're banging the nail like we are nailing my thesis to the wall. Thank you very much. You have now made my work public. Questions? What is the norm here? The norm? Yeah. For questions? Yes. Do you want? We can switch the recording off, and you can go berserk. Yes.
I already took a question, but I didn't know if that was a formal thing to say or if you really wanted a question.
No, I love questions now. Yeah.
Yes. And I would like to know more about what part of the VR LARPs is LARPing. Because I heard a lot about the technique, different kind of hybrid technique, but what was LARPs about?
The LARPs are
Like, what
yeah.
was the LARP part?
The LARPs are about different things. I mean, there are so many LARP-ish things happening in VR. I could show you the role play repo, which is the site where we the repository for all the online LARPs. The thing is that they are not the kind of LARPs I like.
That was interesting.
Which is why I spend so much time doing workshops and I'm not online, but there's at least 100 campaigns on there, and vrroleplayrepo.com is where you'll find it. There's so many campaigns, but people treat each other, they treat the story, they treat their presence a bit like you do when you play World of Warcraft. It's a bit more removed, I think. It's
I mean, your LARPs.
my LARPs.
Yeah.
Oh, different things. The theme is not always as important to me as the. Well, I think they're about the relating itself is what is important, I think. And the story can, as long as the form of the story is the right form of the story, I don't care so much about the theme. Is that what you wanted to know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Can be different things. I like things that make you have to use your imagination a lot. So if I involve some supernatural elements or something that you have to make up something. Yeah. Veronica.
Can you just a little bit follow up on what you just said, meaning like give some examples about exercises or workshop type of workshopping activities that help you or like make you feel that really something's happening, just sparking imagination?
Oh, to spark the imagination, I mainly workshop around embodiment. That is mostly the workshops I do, and we do all the kind of imaginary, passing on imaginary objects and trying to feel physical and present and feeling, trying to imagine that when we touch, we actually touch. So because a lot of beginners in VR, they just walk straight through each other or straight through walls, and when they check out, they leave their bodies lying on the floor, and it's not the done thing. In VR, we have etiquette. If we leave, we move our bodies aside so people don't have to step over them. But it's I think it's being mindful and respectful of the presence we have in VR. That is the important thing to me, I think. Yeah.
Very cool, very cool response.
Okay. So,
what is the most powerful experience you've had in a VR LARP?
the most powerful experience I had in a VR LARP, I think it's when Ames is GMing and I suddenly just hear her voice in my ear telling me what's going to happen next, and I have half a second to think about how I'm going to react to that. It's very cool to have this disembodied voice of the GM, because when they GM in that kind of setting, the facilitators or the GMs are not visible. They're just disembodied voices floating around, and they can zoom to players wherever the players are, even if they have huge maps. They can just zoom over to any player and turn on a little light so I know to follow the guiding light in front of me, or just whisper things in my ear. It's a very intimate and powerful presence, I think. Yeah. Alexandra.
You mentioned that in 2018,
Yeah.
technology was so much behind, and now it's 20, or
Yeah.
maybe not,
Yeah.
compared to today. Now it's 2026. What do you expect for the next 10 years? And
Well, I don't know what I expect and what I hope may be different things. There seems to be a natural progression with smaller devices and an inbuilt thing in glasses and what have you. I'm not sure. I think this is great because, like I said, it's all entangled. It's connected to our integrity. It's connected to how in what way we use the Earth's resources, and I'm not. Yeah, and there's going to be a big division in who can afford what and have access to what worlds, and I'm not sure it's going to be better. There's going to be more fancy tech, sure. I'm not sure that's what I hope for. Anna?
To follow up on that, because the only reason for me
Yeah.
to design, since I'm a LARP designer, is to design in VR.
Yeah.
Is to have skins that are better than costumes.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you discussed, because I was like, why don't they have plant skin? Did you discuss that?
Oh, definitely. That was a very conscious choice not to have plant skin.
I would like you
Yeah.
to talk about that, because that's how
This
my
is
mind
the
works.
big part that I omitted from this talk, that LARPing in VR allows you to be present, interactive, and fully embodied without having the gaze on your body, on your face, on your skin, on your, So you can, your virtual model can look like more or less exactly what you want your character to look like, whether that be a plant or a person or a. But I wanted the mental gymnastics of having to imagine being the plant and talking to the plant. I didn't, yeah.
Oh, that's a very good question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You already answered the question.
They're running.
Yes. I have a question regarding facilitation, because when you have live facilitation, you have this room reading, you have some intuition that helps you to manage the situation. And what's your strategy? Like, what are your ideas regarding facilitation of VR LARPs? Like, what helps you to survive?
What helps me to survive are having friends who are good at helping out. That's always a good solution. Today I had 3 very experienced VR LARPers, and we who have some mileage in VR, we can kind of tell when people are moving in a way that, they look a bit uncertain. And then you can scoot over there and ask them, are you okay? Shall I explain something about the menu? So what do you need? So that is helpful. To have many eyes on the game is helpful, because you can't be everywhere all at once. And what is also helpful is actually organizing LARPs only for people who are already in VR. Then you don't have to tell them anything. You just have to tell them the story and the play. Because most of them are developers and tech people anyway. They know so much more than I do. Sarah,
Is there anything that it's really not useful for in terms of embodiment?
I mean, as long as you're on a quest, your legs are kind of dragging behind. So if you want good leg movements, then you need extra trackers. We have done dancing, like hole in the wall. Of course, we're LARPers. We always dance hole in the wall. We have done that in VR. It was hilarious. It was so much fun. We put a video tutorial in a world where we are, and we all looked at the video and kind of crashed into each other. But it more or less worked, which was nice. It was hard, but it was also very fun. I think we're done, people, because it's we need to clear the room for the next person. And thanks